Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Yasmin. I appreciate the opportunity to support the accelerator today and provide to you some information about SBIR STTR proposal prep. Uh, this is a class I don't believe that I've done for y'all yet, and it's kind of timely, hopefully not too late. This is a very busy proposal prep season, or couple weeks actually. Right now we're in the middle of DoD, DOE, NASA, and a portion of the Air Force in between yesterday. Oh, and NSF between yesterday and next week. So this is a very, very busy time of year. We're going to talk a little bit about proposal cadence today. So just mark your calendars for this time next year if you get really interested in pulling these things together. So today, as Yasmin mentioned, my name is Stephanie. I'm the advising director for GovIRG. We are a consulting firm out of Colorado, but we support everybody around the world, I guess, supposedly. And I've been doing SBIR, STTR proposals since 2006. So I have seen every iteration, every round. I have touched, I think, virtually all the agencies. I've read plenty of debriefs. I've seen good proposals win. I've seen good proposals lose. I've seen lots of bad proposals. So we're going to talk today about the best practices that you can implement if you are interested in proposing. If you've never done it before, there's going to be information for you. If you've proposed before, never won, there'll be information for you. And if you have won, you've been lucky enough to win in this program, hopefully this will give you some new information that you haven't learned before. And by the way, I say SBIR, STTR. I feel like the tide is turning and a lot of people say SBIR nowadays. Same thing. We'll talk about what it means if you've never heard of it before. Okay, let's dive into the agenda. We have an hour, almost an hour booked. The slides may not take that long, so I want to definitely answer your questions. I will leave those to the end, of course, and we can run through those. So please record them down to make sure that we address them. But I'll talk about the overview of the program, and just in case you're not familiar with it, or it's been a while, or maybe you'll learn something new, what this program is, where you should begin. The proposal content, a lot of people want to know what these things are made of. We'll talk about TABA, which stands for Technical and Business Assistance. I will touch a little bit about intellectual property, since the generation of IP is kind of core to this program. And then I have a separate best practices section that we'll talk, but throughout the presentation, I will talk about things to keep in mind. So the overview of the program, this is an abridged version of a longer training that that I've done before, or maybe you've seen from other accelerators, or maybe, online or wherever. So if I've missed something, please, ask a question about it if you're not sure, but I wanted to just spend most of the time on the proposals. So if you're familiar with SBIR, it stands for Small Business Innovative Research, and STTR is Small Business Tech Transfer. So they're one and the same. They're both directed by the SBA. The SBA is the one who manages the entire program. The difference between STTR is that you have to have a research institution partnered with you in order to perform any of those. But everything I talk about here is really applicable regardless if you're doing SBI or STTR. There are some nuances to STTR. Feel free to ask questions about that. But this program is the largest source of early stage financing for small businesses here in the United States. So we like to call it non-dilutive capital. We like to think of these agencies as investors, if you want to, in the fact that they're giving you money to do research and development, and to test the scientific merit, and to bring things to prototype and demonstration, and then hopefully commercialize those into the market. It's 3 phases, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is phase 1, because for the most part you generally have to enter the program at a phase 1. There are times where you can jump in at phase 2. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're kind of talking a lot about phase one. But phase one is where the government wants you to test the scientific, technical, and commercial merit of a concept that you have. Now, the concept can't be something you just woke up with this morning while you're having coffee and decided you're going to create. Maybe it is, but hopefully it's established and it has some legs already. You have a background, or someone on your team has a background in this and is an expert in whatever this concept might be. And again, it's not like I could wake up in the morning and decide I'm going to design a new sort of satellite communication system. So when we talk about phase one, we generally talk about technology readiness levels, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, I suggest you Google it. But the technology readiness level generally for phase one is around a 2 to a 3. Sometimes it can be a 1, which is, very, very new, very, very untested. 2 has a little bit of legs to it. So that's kind of what we're looking to do. They're not very long in terms of period of performance. There could be option periods, or generally 6 to 12 months. It all depends on the agency. They range in price drastically. Again, depending on the agency, 75 to 250 is sort of the range. It does change over time and each round that goes out. But the point is, you're going to test this idea. You're going to come up with some hypotheses in your proposal. Those are your technical objectives. Hopefully, with this money and over the course of time, you prove those hypotheses to be true or not true. And you're saying, hey, you know what? We moved that needle a little bit along. We're a little bit further along now on this technology readiness level. We're going to go to phase 2. And again, phase 2 is handled differently by each agency, but they're generally about 2 years long, 750,000 to at least over $1 million. And this is where you take that TRL level 3 idea or concept now, and you're going to further develop it. Typically, it's to a prototype stage or a demonstration stage. Yeah, like I said, generally about 2 years to do this. The hope is by the end of that phase, you are near ready or ready to commercialize, meaning that, and you probably will need further investment. But say if it's a tangible item that you prototyped in phase 2, you're now ready to get into manufacturing, or to develop some first articles for an agency. So commercialization it's just non-SBIR funds that are there to move this into the market, whether the market's the government, a large prime contractor, Home Depot. It doesn't, it could be anybody. We're just trying to get it out into the market. So your goal when you're thinking about whether or not you're going to write a proposal is always that you must have an idea on how to get from phase 1 to phase 3. This is not a R&D hamster wheel. They really want to see that you are going to infuse something into the market. A lot of people ask me, which agencies award the most. It's very much correlated to the R&D budgets of an agency. There is a calculation that the SBA determines how much money an agency must set aside for SBIR funding. And you can see DoD and HHS have very high award counts and high obligation, which means the amount of the money on the award. So those usually have your biggest opportunities, because there's just a lot more money there, but there's also a lot more competition. So just because you see EPA or Department of Transportation further to the right on this graph, that doesn't mean that they're not worthwhile. It just means that they just don't have as big of a research budget. So it might be a little tougher sell. The selection rates, again, this is all 2019 data. I checked yesterday. The SBA has not released an annual report since 2019 to the public, which is quite shocking, actually. These rates haven't really changed over the years, though, so we can take this as a pretty good example. But the chart on the left are the phase 1 proposal selection rates. and the chart on the right are phase two. Because this is a competitive atmosphere, you can see that in general, we hover about, I'm not sure why EPA is at 47%. I've never investigated that number. It does seem sort of odd, but generally, the majority of agencies hover around a 20% win rate. So 20% of proposals submitted are selected. They will select often more than one. And so you are sort of working, you don't get to work alongside the other winners, but you will know who the other winners are. And ultimately, you're down selected in phase two. So say there were 3 phase one awards made for a particular topic that the agency put out, they may, after reviewing phase two proposals, just choose one. Or they might choose 2, it just kind of depends. So that's why the win rate is higher on a phase 2, is because your competition went from, hundreds down to a few, and therefore you have a much better chance of winning a phase 2. The first thing to think about when we talk about proposal success in this program, as you can see those success rates, is that we want to look at what other successes are out there. We want to see what are agencies funding, and I'll talk about this a little later about talking about due diligence. But if you're still on the fence about, oh my gosh, that's a pretty low win rate, I don't know if my idea or my technology is going to stand up. It's kind of helpful to see the success stories that are out there. And the SBIR.gov website is the main portal that the SBA runs. And on the site, they have success stories. They also have a list, and we'll talk about this in due diligence, of all the awardees. But I wanted to pull out 4 awardees that I've always thought were pretty cool because they're just very unique. They run a range of ideas. So we have traumatic brain injury support. We have a family business that provides decontamination facilities. There's a company that does prosthetics. The one here at the bottom is about translation technologies for civilian travelers, warfighters, and hearing impaired. The last one is a great one because I'll talk about this often. The last one's a really great example of a company that has a technology that's easily commercialized. So I don't recall who the funding agency was for this, but let's just say that this is funded by the DoD. So the initial need that's being met was coming from perhaps the Army. The Army says, you know what, we need translation technologies for our war fighters. And the company says, you know what, we've got something that might work. Let's jump into this. The government, the Army in that particular case, really wants to see that it's not just going to support them. They want to know that you've thought about civilian travelers. So that could support any agency where we have people who are traveling for the federal government, but also just your normal tourist. And then they think also here on this other end about people who are hearing impaired, that this could definitely support them. So they thought out of the box in terms of, yes, maybe we'll support the Army's warfighter needs, but with some tweaks, this could go for a lot of options. And that's what the government wants to see. Again, they're an investor. They want to know that their immediate need is going to be met, their R&D need, but they also want to know that you're going to build a good business around it. So I'd just like to focus on that one to give you an idea of like what commercialization could look like. So where to begin? Again, that was a very abridged version about SBIR. Please go online and find some more information, but let's really dive into the proposal. You're saying, okay, this sounds interesting. How do I do this? As I mentioned, we call this non-dilutive capital. The first thing to think about is whether or not you're a best fit for the program, because you might be excited about writing a proposal, but don't write a proposal if you're not a best fit. So Hopefully you're already working on a particular technology, or you have an idea of that, again, it has some legs and you're looking for some funding. So you're kind of going to put these two things together. Maybe it's an old technology that you want to revamp. We call that like a legacy technology. Maybe there's something you've been tinkering with and you need some more funding. And it, as long as you kind of had maybe an extra $100,000 that, you know, maybe you could advance it. That's great. That's where we want you to be. And you need to be eligible to apply. If you're questioning your eligibility, go on to SBIR.gov, check that out. The small business size status is the main one. You have to be under 500 people, and you have some requirements for US owned and operated and performance in the United States. So check that out. So if you can tick those 3 items, the next thing to do is to find the agency. You know, check out who is going to fund this idea. What are they looking for? So we'll talk about who those agencies are. We'll talk about topics. And then, of course, once you kind of find that niche, that's when you go find the solicitation or the RFP, same thing, online, and write a proposal for it. So these are the participating agencies in the program. Again, the law, the act that authorizes this program to exist is the one that dictates the percentage of R&D funding that everybody must have, and the agencies that participate must have a big enough R&D budget to participate in the first place, because a portion of it needs to go to SBIR. So that's why we're not seeing like the Department of Justice or something in here. But as you can see, it's a very big chunk of most of our federal agencies, and particularly those ones that have R&D needs. They will all release solicitations. Within those solicitations, they'll have statements of need or wants, and often we call those topics. They could be very, very specific. They could be very, very broad. The one that doesn't necessarily follow that model is the National Science Foundation. Their perspective is more of, you tell us something cool that you have that's high risk, high reward. You tell us kind of what industry it falls into. Is it biomedical? Is it AI? You know, is it environmental? I mean, it could be anything. It'll fall into something. And you write a pitch to them, and that's all done online. If they like your pitch, then they'll invite you to a phase 1. So they're the only one that does that invitation piece. The pitch is pretty straightforward, but they function slightly differently. So if you feel like you're not seeing what you want from these other agencies, NSF might be the places, you know, to check it out. As I've already mentioned, each agency administers its own program. It has its own guidelines. They designate their own topics. SBA does not do that. It's the agencies themselves. They're competitive. The evaluation factors on these proposals are in the solicitation. We'll talk about that a little later. They post these solicitations. You can get to those through SBIR.gov, and they'll take you out to each individual agency's site. They all have their own guidelines, so you can't write one for NSF and then hope to use it for DoD in the exact form that it's in. There'll be some reuse, but not necessarily. And they all have a different proposal cycle. So as I mentioned at the very, very beginning, we are in a very heavy cycle because a bunch of agencies overlap each other. Particularly NASA is only once a year, and I'll show you a calendar. And so this is NASA's time right now. So the first thing to think about is, okay, yes, I think we can fit one of these agencies, but this program has been going on for a long time, and there are a lot of really cool small businesses out there. So one thing I like to suggest as a very first step is your due diligence. So what are these agencies looking for, and what do they already fund? So you'll get some idea on what they're looking for by reading the solicitation, looking at the topics. They provide references to publications often that they're interested in. You can look at past solicitations to see what they've been interested in the past. But if you look at the actual awards that have already been made in past rounds, you can do that by keyword search, or if you have a known competitor, you can put their name in there. There's a few ways to search, but the last thing you want to do is assume that your idea is state of the art and new and novel. And it's not. And the very first thing to do is like, okay, have they already funded this? And if they did fund something similar, who is that company? What are they doing? Is this too similar to what's already been funded before? There's just a lot of questions to ask yourself in this area. So this is the very first place to start, is to make sure that what you're thinking about is truly novel and unique, and that you have an opportunity to get funding and somebody says, oh yeah, that's cool, that's new. So start there, start this in an award search. We also have a proposal planning sort of checklist. If you're on this call and you've already worked with the Apex Accelerator, hopefully you have a few things in place already. So obviously you need to be in business. You need to have, if you're incorporated or you're an LLC, you need to have your EIN, TIN. That's all set. You're good. You're a company. Your SAM.gov needs to be completed. You will get your UEI out of there, your unique entity ID, from your SAM registration. You'll need that. Each agency has their own SBIR website. Everything is submitted electronically. So it might be through grants.gov, it might be through the agency site. So that's something to think about. In general, you might have to register in grants.gov to see some of these things or find them. You also need to register in the SBIR.gov. This is the company, SBA company registry site, as well as the informational site for SBIR.gov. So make sure you're registered there. You will need your EIN and your SAM in order to register for that. So do those two things first, then go into SBIR. Finally, I just listed out a few of the other sites. Unfortunately, everybody has something different. We have ERA Commons, we have NSPIRES, we have research.gov, we have now NASA is using ProSAMs as of this round. They were using something called EHP. DoD has one called DSIP. Again, you'll have to go into these sites, get registered, and follow the instructions super closely, because things like ERA Commons and research.gov, they have these weird roles and responsibilities and who can do what in the system, and principal investigator can do certain things and has to approve proposals, or only the person who set up the account can submit the proposal. So it sounds really annoying, and it is. Make sure that you have read that solicitation and go into these websites and fully understand, because the last thing you want to do is be about to submit and you realize you don't have the right account access to do that. And then login.gov, hopefully you already have that because you have SAM, but some of these are tied to login.gov as well. Early registration, if you haven't done SAM.gov, it could take 6 to 8 weeks. So it's super important to start early, or if you run into a problem, any of these sites, the help desks may not be very responsive. So give yourself time. One note about DOE is that they require a letter of intent to submit a proposal. And that has to go in 7 weeks prior to the solicitation close date. So again, each of these agencies is very unique and specific, and just be really familiar with your agency as you're planning your proposal. So we already kind of talked about agency applicability, where do you fit, where's the best option, and hopefully you figured that out through reading the solicitation and doing your due diligence. The release timelines are something to think about. Again, I mentioned NASA does theirs once a year. Their proposals, I think, are due the 11th or 12th. So if you haven't started your NASA proposal and you think that's where you want to go, I don't know, you have time, you have to wait till next year, hopefully not. We want to look at, once you see the agencies, is there a particular topic? Some people say, oh, I can fit into a few topics, but you only have the resources or time to do one. We talk about, hey, which one's the easiest one for you to write? Which one are you most jazzed about? Which one do you hope that you get funded? Where do you think you have like the least competition? That's part of your topic selection. Commercialization potential is huge because it's an evaluation factor. So again, yes, you might be making something specifically for the Army because that's what they asked for, but how else are you going to make money off of this technology outside of the Army being a potential customer? Will you need a research institution? Are you going after an STTR? Do you have a relationship with that research institution? Are you going to have a subcontractor? There are subcontracting limits on this program. They want to ensure that the small business actually does the majority of the work. But who else do you need? Do you need a consultant? All of that. Where is your technology most applicable? Again, that relates to your commercialization potential. Is this a very specific need that's going to be very, very hard to commercialize? Is this something that's going to be more malleable? Is there something that you could like put into NASA, and maybe you can go to SpaceWorks or SpaceX, excuse me. Maybe that's where you need to be. NSF is looking for high risk, high reward. If you're not high risk, high reward, they don't want to see it. There was a point in time where they were accepting tons of project pitches and lots of proposals, and they have cracked down and become very strict lately on project pitches. They really want, the next internet is what they want somebody to build. But NSF allows you to talk to program managers. So their information is on the website. You can talk to those people. You can email them. Most of them are responsive. So if you're not sure if you're high risk, high reward, it might be a good thing to talk to them and check that out. That's a really nice thing about them. Kind of going back to commercialization, is this solely military or not? And then again, really get to know the agency. If you're thinking about writing a proposal for one of these, you really have to understand the customer. So you may have an idea of what state of the art is. It may not match what they think state of the art is. They do often have experts in your field who have written the topic, who are evaluating your proposals, but that doesn't mean that you're on the same page. So you do have to understand like where they're coming from, what are they interested in. Your goal is not to push an idea on them because you think it's cool. Your goal is to say, what is that agency going to be excited about and what need do they have? We call it the significance of the opportunity or the problem identification. You are talking to that. You're saying, oh, I recognize this is where you're coming from and where you are and what you need. I have a solution. Let me tell you about it. That's the frame of mind that you need to have going into all these proposals. Here's the cadence. This is updated as of September. You can see we're here in March. Oh, Department of Commerce NIST. I forgot about that one. It's happening now, and so is DOT and education. DOD has these little fuzzy things. That is their standard traditional SBIRs. Some of the components, particularly Air Force, have one that's called the Commercial Solutions Offering, CSO. It runs a little differently. The proposals are different. The values are different. Those are off cycle. If you go to the DoD SBIR site, you will see that it is not reflected in this chart. So yeah, we have a lot of things going on. The DOE one has shifted to the right, so that's still open. Let's talk about what's inside of these proposals. So a typical package, again, this is what these forms look like and how they're submitted, and some of the content is different agency to agency. In general, though, they all will have a cover page. There'll be a proposal summary, so something like an abstract. You'll have certifications that you have to make on behalf of the company, and you'll have commercial metrics that have to be reported. Those commercial metrics don't count against you if you've never won an SBIR and have never commercialized anything. But they become important once you start winning and going from phase 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. So there is an aspect of recording commercialization successes that you have to report. The meat of this thing that we're talking about and what's mostly evaluated is the technical proposal. Sometimes it's called a project narrative, sometimes it's called a project description, sometimes it's called a tech volume, but this is, and I have another slide that gives you more detail, but this is the meat of what's being evaluated. This is saying, I know what you need. Let me tell you how it's going to fit you. Here's who we are. Here's how I'm going to spend your money. Like, this is my scope of work. This is how other things I've done that relate. These are my key people, and this is why they're so great. And here's my team. So that is that's very, very important. And it can take a lot longer to write these than just sitting down in a weekend, but some people can do that. I wouldn't recommend it. So this is going to be reviewed by people who are experts in your field. You do have to tell the government how you're going to spend their money, and you have to do that in very minute detail, even though for phase 1, it's under the simplified acquisition threshold, which if you're familiar with other government contracting, typically you don't have to provide too much information, especially if it's competitive. But in this world, in SBIR, STTR world, you do have to provide labor categories, pay rates, indirect rates, cost of materials, detailed travel if travel's allowed, supporting information from subcontractors who also need to provide detail to the level that you're required to provide. So for example, for NSF, you have to provide a very detailed budget. Your subawardee also has to provide a very detailed budget. And that goes into the system. And so that becomes, this often is where a lot of people get tripped up because they're very familiar with the technical proposal and they know what they want to do, but pricing it out becomes a big challenge. So if you get stuck there, definitely reach out for help. There's also a lot of other supporting documents. I think the DoD commercial solutions offering that's open right now, I think it's due tomorrow, no, 2 days, has 13 attachments to it. So you might only be getting like $100,000 from them. And that one you have to do a slide deck. But you have to do 13 attachments. So give yourself time for what those attachments might be. And then Army, Air Force, MDA, all of those agents, Navy, they all have different individual component requirements. So just because the DoD one might be open, there's a DoD solicitation, and then you have to look for the component solicitation, and you have to weave the two together and make sure that you're complying with both. The component solicitation takes precedence over the DoD. In the systems that these all get put into, generally there's information about your company that lives in the system that typically you just do once, and then you can go up and update them as things change in your company or each round that you go in. And so those are like firm certifications. Those are information about that determine your eligibility. Somewhat similar to SAM.gov stuff, but more related to SBIR rules. There's a policy out there. So there's some policy stuff that happens in these. Any audit information that you have about, mainly this is really about your accounting system. You don't get counted down for this, but if you have an approved accounting system, they want to know. And then commercialization information that I've mentioned, and then POCs. So there's kind of almost 2 separate parts to these online submission places. that you'll have to navigate. So when we talk about when somebody comes to me and says, can you review my proposal? My question is like, do you want me to review the entire package, or you just want me to look at the tech volume? Or, there's a lot to this. So the best thing to do is to go through the solicitation, pull out all the requirements. Like, we usually build a compliance matrix for these things and tick them off to make sure that you've accomplished each of them, and then always keep track of the fact that you have more than your technical to write. So kind of a repeat of what I mentioned, but one thing I want to point out is most of the agencies require you to put this detailed budget, but then they want to have some sort of justification behind it. So it might be a letter of commitment from a consultant who's going to be supporting this. It might be an online quote for a piece of material that you're going to buy. There's various pieces of justification. It might just be a write-up, a narrative, to say like how you arrived at your basis of estimate. So leave time for yourself to write this up. I will say that most people see the limit that the particular solicitation they're going after says. It might be $175,000 is the limit, and people will get their budget to $174,999. That's okay, but you just have to have justification behind it. The budget, when reviewed against your scope of work that you're proposing, needs to make sense. Some other supporting documents, if the solicitation allows it, you might have letters of support. You might have technical data rights. There's foreign disclosure forms. The solicitation will tell you. Typically, the tech volume or the project description talks about what's the problem or opportunity, what are your objectives, what are you going to do? Again, how are you going to spend that money? What other work have you done that makes you qualified to do this? What's the relationship with future R&D? What's your commercialization strategy? That needs to be pretty well thought out, even in phase 1. Who your key personnel are, who's a principal investigator who's going to be leading the research. If you have any foreign citizens, they need to be identified. What kind of facilities and equipment do you or your subcontractors have? Who are your subcontractors? And then if you have any prior current or pending similar proposals, you have to identify those so they don't double fund. So some things to think about in your tech volume. Again, what are they asking for? Is this truly innovative? Why does this have technical merit? So it may make sense to you, but so I'd always suggest somebody else to read your proposal against the solicitation and the topic to see if you're being clear that this is innovative. Have you done your research? Have you done those due diligence? What is the agency's focus? What is truly the state of the art? Tell the people who are reviewing these. Figures and tables always are great. Reviewers do like to see those things. It helps them, visualize and distill your narrative. You can always capture or lose people in that first section. So kind of going back up to this very first bullet, identification, significance of the problem or opportunity. This is where you catch the reader, the reviewer, and say, I get you. I totally know what you need, and I have it. Get them excited to read on, because if they're reading thousands, well, not one person will read thousands, but they will get thousands of applications, and they're each maybe 15 pages long on average. I mean, they may not read the whole thing, is what I'm saying. So pay attention. Answer the question, why is this worthy of funding? What can you accomplish? Like, if you were given the opportunity, what can you accomplish? How far can you get? And that's phase 3. So for the budget, like I mentioned, you are going to have to show labor categories, hours, their pay rates, quotes, proposals from subcontractors. And one thing that trips a lot of people up, and if you've never calculated your indirect rates before, this is something you should do. You will not get audited on them on a phase 1, but they will ask you questions about it. And it's the only way to see if it's reasonable is to truly see what your indirect rates are. Some agencies will say if you don't have approved rates, you have to use a de minimis percentage, which is 10% generally. Your business most likely has a higher indirect rate, what we call a wrap rate, than 10%. And so you could be losing money on this if you don't actually, even if you choose the de minimis rate as your default, you should know what your real rate is. You know the difference between the two. Like, what are you going to get paid versus what you're actually spending? And you do get profit on these. Generally, most people use 7%. Some agencies tell you you have to use 7%, but that is the number. Some pricing strategy is just what will take you to accomplish the work. What's the budget cap? Does this really make sense? You know, maybe you proposed 2 tasks, but you're asking for the full amount of money. That will raise a red flag. That doesn't make any sense. Same with the opposite. You proposed 40 different tasks in your 6-month scope of work. There's no way you could complete it all in 6 months, and there's no way this money will cover it. Those are the kind of things people are going to be looking at. Since this is all done online, I think only 1 or 2 DoD components have you upload an Excel spreadsheet. The rest are hard-coded numbers online. So best practice is to use Excel outside and then fill it in. Retain all your basis of estimates. And then again, you might have a written narrative. So think about all these things as you're writing up your tech volume. Those are kind of like the basic strategies of the big parts here, but you also get an opportunity to get technical and business assistance to help you mainly with commercialization. So I wanted to talk about this because a lot of people gloss over it. They're not sure what it is when they see it in a solicitation. But essentially, the SBA realized a little while ago that they're requiring small businesses to do commercialization, and these small businesses do not have the resources to do it. And so they said, okay, each agency, we want you to offer additional money for assistance or build your own program that companies can opt into to participate and learn more about commercialization and get help. So generally, I mean, it's pretty flexible right now. I don't know if that's always going to be the way it's going to go, but this is supposed to help you pay for product sales, IP protection. A lot of market research and validation is really helpful. Regulatory compliance, and then just kind of overall commercialization support. So a lot of our clients in phase 1 will use TABA for commercialization support. So hiring a consultant to help them do some market research and write a really great commercialization section for their phase 2 proposal. And then often in phase 2, as you can see, these numbers get really high. You can get $50,000 extra, you know, to do all these other things. So that might be paying for a patent attorney. That might be paying for, you know, somebody to write up a whole bunch of policies and procedures. There's a lot of great stuff that you can do, but man, try to use this money if you can, because most often, and again, read the solicitation, most often it is in addition to your award amount. So, but you do need to choose your TABA provider at the time of your proposal because they have to submit something with your proposal. So very valuable stuff. It is paid for by the agency, by the way. So you have a line item in your contract or grant that you can get reimbursed for this stuff. So your TABA provider is sort of like a subcontractor. They bill you, you bill the agency. Again, as I mentioned, you have to submit the TABA provider at the time of proposal. Read your solicitation really carefully about what the rules are for that particular agency. If you are using a vendor that is offered or a program that's offered by the agency, you can't do both. So you have to choose. So sometimes I believe DOE is one of those agencies that says, hey, you can participate with us and kind of join us, and you don't get the TABA money added to your grant. And people will say, okay, I'll try that first for phase 1. And then in phase 2, they go off and find a TABA provider. That's something that happens too. Kind of getting towards the end here. I want to make sure we have enough time for questions, but this is like a multi-hour course in of itself about IP, particularly with SBIR and strategy behind it. And I could talk about this all day. So I purposefully limited this so I wouldn't go too long on it. But the whole point, right, is to move technology into the market. So you are getting money to do research and development. The assumption is that you're going to have technical data, you're going to have computer software and its documentation, and you're going to have patents that come out of this. Like these things are generated because that's what you need in order to get something to market. So the cool thing, typically, let me take a step back. Typically, if the government's funding stuff outside of this program, because they're paying for it, they want unlimited rights to it. As a small business, generally, you get to keep title and ownership to stuff, but you give unlimited rights to the government generally. So when you kind of give unlimited rights, it doesn't really matter if you have title or not, because you just gave somebody the right to do whatever they want. The cool thing about this program is that you get what's called SBIR data rights. So anything developed with the SBIR, STTR money during the performance is protected, and is protected to really limit the government's use of it. So the government's still paying for it, but they're saying, you know what? We knew if we took unlimited rights that you guys would have a hard time commercializing. So we're going to not really use any rights for 20 years from the award date of the grant. So, I mean, hopefully within 20 years, you've done something valuable with that intellectual property and it's no longer valuable once that protection period is over and everybody's forgotten about it anyway. And you get to protect pre-existing IP that comes in. So again, there's a lot of things to know and learn about this, but I wanted your takeaway to be that you're getting money to develop new IP, and it is going to be protected underneath of this regime of the SBIR data rights. So that's a pretty cool bonus, I think, from an investor's perspective. So that's the IP part. Really quickly, I talked a lot about best practices throughout, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on here, but as a recap, we want to make sure, like, this is just basic stuff. Like when you're putting in these proposals, make sure the forms and fields are filled out correctly, your font, your headers, your footers, your page count, all of that matches the solicitation, that your numbers add up in your budget and the budget justification. You have all your documents, everything is filled out appropriately and signed if it needs to be signed. And then ultimately, hopefully you've done all the administrative stuff okay, your registrations are all okay, and your technical proposal is really where you get to spend some time and just make sure that your state of the art has been demonstrated. So what I really like to do is just make sure all of this stuff is taken care of, and so that the time you have left over, you can really refine that pitch. Part of that refinement is really questioning this commercialization piece over and over and over again. Again, where does it end up? What's the market? Who are your government customers? Who are your commercial customers? What's your market size? What will this do for the company? You need to know most of these basics in a phase 1 proposal. You have to have at least done some of your own market research so that you can pitch to the government that this is worthwhile. So focus on that. I always recommend a self-evaluation. Sometimes you hear this called like a red team review or white glove or something like that. The evaluation factors are in the solicitation. Check those out. They want to see that there's merit and feasibility. They want to look at the team experience, the qualifications, the facilities that you have, your commercialization potential, potentially some broader impacts as well. They also might want to look at the effectiveness of the proposed work plan and your price reasonableness. They may weight these different factors differently. Take this and put it up against that tech volume. Make sure that if you were to give yourself a score, you get gold stars all across all of these areas. And if you feel you're weak on anything, hopefully you have enough time to address those weaknesses. Some of the pitfalls I see a lot. I mean, it's amazing how many people have the wrong margins. That's an easy one to kick your proposal out. If you have half-inch margins, they're supposed to be inch, you kicked out. The principal investigator, making sure they're qualified to lead the research. The innovation may not be there. Commercialization looks made up, doesn't make sense. Your pricing's not supported. You might have missed Q&A that they release on the solicitation or amendments that impact. So go check the solicitation multiple times, and particularly right before you submit to make sure you haven't missed anything. Don't miss the due time. Some are Eastern, some are not. And of course, give yourself the most time you can for review. That's really important. Pay attention to your time zones. Those are interesting depending on the system you're using. Everybody's submitting at the last minute. The online system can slow down, or you might have computer issues. Oftentimes you'll get a success email. Make sure that you understand how your system works to make sure it's not like stuck there or there's not another step you have to do. So go back and make sure it actually was submitted. If you have problems, contact the help desk. Make sure you have proof that you attempted to contact them if you end up not being able to submit on time. And then you start waiting. So it's generally about 3 months until you're notified of award. Sometimes it can take longer. So some other things to think about is firm fixed price, that you're not going to get audited on this stuff. This is kind of a rehash of what we've already talked about. But again, give yourself enough time. This is really important. And then with IP, really think about your IP strategy and plan now and how that might change over time. And ensure that if there's any pre-existing IP that you want to bring into this project, that you identify that in the proposal now so that you can give them a heads up to protect it. Okay, there's a lot of information there. Hopefully the slide deck will be helpful later on, but I will open it up now, Yasmin, to questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was very thorough. Really appreciate it. So yeah, we've got a few minutes left. So what I'll do is I'll start by going through the chat box and seeing what questions have been posted. If you think of anything else or you'd like Stephanie to repeat anything, just put that in the chat box as well. And of course, I'm going to be sending you the recording and a copy of the presentation after the class is over. Okay, first question is from Ezra. And Ezra asks, what if you want to bring lab testing that will assist with managing healthcare? For instance, we do testing for respiratory diseases and want to bring it to the VA. Can you apply for SBIR for that?
The VA does not participate in the program. You might be able to get funding from HHS or from NSF. I think the key would be is you would have to have an idea for creating an innovative and new test that's not currently on the market and not currently used by anybody, including the VA.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, we own our tech software. We are testing it in Africa at the moment and are trying to raise funds to get our USA license. Can we apply?
I'm not exactly sure what the reference to USA license may be, but you must be owned by US citizens. And the work must be performed in the United States in order to be eligible. So as long as you go to SBIR.gov and look at the eligibility requirements, you should be eligible to apply if you meet those. And if, of course, the technology is something that one of the agencies is looking for.
Okay, thank you. Next one is it possible to obtain a late stage SBIR if your product is ready for commercialization and already has market share?
That might be a tough one. The fit where you could go, it might be limited to the DoD and that commercial solutions offering opportunity I was talking about. The agency, a couple of DoD components want to see commercial offerings that are already out there that you can modify for military need. So that's probably the only place. Otherwise, you would have to take your commercial offering and somehow revamp it, modify it, change it, whatever, to make it unique and innovative to meet an agency need they're calling for right now.
Okay, that's great. That seems to be all our questions today. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Stephanie. And also to remind you that we do have specialist SBIR, STTR counselors on board here at the Apex Accelerator. So if you think that this is something that's going to really help your business, your tech idea, then please let your counselor know and they can refer you to someone who can help. So thanks again, everyone. I'm going to send the recording out now, and we hope to see you again at a future Apex Accelerator event. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Stephanie. Bye.